So I'm going to talk to Baz, the blue-haired wonder. I call him the blue-haired wonder. I don't know if anybody else calls him that. His name is Michael Balzer, but we all know him, and we all know and love him as Baz. And Baz works for a company called Bizarre, and he's an attractions theme park attractions entertainment guy. Hey.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, I can't see you yet. Let's see. Are you on a video? Yeah. Oh, there you are.
I am.
Awesome.
Hey.
Cool. So it's what time is it there? Is it like 9 o'clock in the morning or something?
It is. It's 9 o'clock in the morning.
And what's the temperature like?
Well, I can show you out the window here. We got a. Oh no, I can't see it. It's 3 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh. Okay, so for those of you in the viewing audience, Baz is in Detroit, and what are you actually doing there today?
I'm here for a week of music recording sessions. I'm working with the team at Yessian Music here in Detroit, and we're laying down some very specialized audio. Been doing some stuff with Asian music, with African music, and with choral arrangements. So we've been parading in a bunch of really specialized musicians, djembe drummers and oudou drummers and balafonists and musical saw players and fiddles and banjos. It's just been a super weird, awesome week.
That's cool. That's really awesome. You're meeting all these great people. What a great life. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Baz, Michael Balzer. He works with a company called Bizarre, and I'm videotaping this interview, of course, and it's actually, the paper I sent you says it's for BOPisodes, but it's not. It's actually for BOPisodes, which is BOP, and it stands for Born on Purpose episodes, right? Okay. Because one of the challenges in my life was figuring out what the hell I wanted to do with my life. So I figured one of the things that helped me was to get to know people that kind of figured it out and are on a path and that are successful and doing great stuff. And in my opinion, you're one of those guys, Baz. So I thought it would be nice to interview you. So that's where I kind of want to start is, how'd you know? Tell us a little bit about your history and kind of what happened and stuff like that. And what I'm really kind of interested in, and I want people to focus on maybe, and I didn't ask you this, I probably should have forewarned you, but was there a point in your life? Was there some epiphany, some event, something that happened that made you go, man, this is what I want to do, or this is my purpose? I mean, did you come out of the womb thinking I want to be an attractions guy? Or how did it all work out?
Well, I guess no one really comes out of the womb knowing they want to be an attractions guy, right? Like, probably like most people in this business, I didn't know it was a business until I was already well into like my first creative career. So when I was growing up, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and there's a tiny little amusement park in Pittsburgh. It's actually a trolley park for theme park nerds, called Kennywood. And it's actually on like the national list of historic places. It's one of the oldest continuously operating amusement parks in America, and it has a very like unique aesthetic, and it's very tied to its like historic roots. And I would go there every year as a kid, and I loved it. And I didn't make my first trip to Disney parks until I was like 11 or 12, and I loved that too. And so I'd always appreciated and really loved the experience of these places, but I never took the time to understand that there were people that had to make them. It's a no-brainer now, right?
Sure.
Of course, someone's got to design the roller coaster, someone's got to build the queue, someone's got to put signs up. Like there's billion people that work on these things, but they're very invisible in the theme park industry.
Yeah.
So it was just a thing that I enjoyed doing as a kid, and then I got the creative bug when I was like in middle school and did like a couple of middle school plays, and I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I became like a theater oriented person, and I jumped in with both feet. So I went to like a performing arts high school. I went and did a BFA program for college. After college, I like toured France doing pretentious European neo-mime shows, and like.
So were you one of those mime guys that everybody hates? You know.
I was, but not for the same reason that everyone hates normal mimes. So I didn't do a whole lot of like, you know, white face and black and white striped shirts and pretend to have a robe. But we did this weird a play called Limitless, which was a movement theater story about the megalithic alignments in Karnak and in Brittany, in France. So it was really like spiritual and bizarre and weird, and had a lot of avant-garde music to it. And like that was the kind of miming I did. So everyone hated that.
Well, that sounds almost cultish, you know. I mean, in its kind of its sense, you know. Yeah.
So I guess what I can say is like in my early stages of my like theater career, I like found like a little nugget of a thing that was really peculiar, and would really get latched onto it and fall in with like that specific thing. Like I didn't care to do guys and dolls. I wanted to do the weirdo mime theater.
Right.
And then after that, I started doing comedy, sketch comedy. And again, it was like, I am the kind of comedy I want to do. Like, I'm going to dig down and do this like really specific kind of comedy. And I did that for like 12 years.
Wow.
And yeah,
so
it's a weird story. It's a bit sideways, but like
no, but you spent a ton of time actually kind of honing your skills in front of an audience. I mean, you put in, you know, they say it takes like 10,000 hours for a musician to get good. You spent those 10,000 hours in front of getting good or bad reactions in front of people that you were reading instantly.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And doing that, and also like building the communities of other artists around that kind of performance. Like I was really tight with my theater people. I was really tight with my comedy people. So that I think that was a big part of it too. Wow.
So that's a you know, a brotherhood or a sisterhood that is kind of unshakable, you know, when you're because you're kind of out there riding the edge, you know, and fearlessly getting up and doing stuff that's, whether it's improvisation or whatever it is, it's putting yourself out there, kind of pushing the edge. Let's go back a bit. So you said you jumped in with both feet, but I want the epiphany, you know. I mean, at what point did you go, man, this is the life for Baz. This is what I'm going to be doing. Can you remember a time that occurred? Was it in middle school when you did the drama thing?
Yeah, the idea that I would do something creative for a living was in like middle school time. Like the first time I did a play, and I was like, I would think I was 10 or 11, and I would stay up late, and I would use an audio cassette recorder to record Saturday Night Live, and I would like play it back and learn impressions, and like people would react to me doing impressions of Dana Carvey, doing impressions of George Bush, and like that, the way that paid off, like the rewards that I got from like performing for someone and them giving me some feedback, like I was like, yeah, like this is what I want to do. And that just, I think everything I've done since then has been, you know, some variant of that kind of an exercise.
Well, that's awesome.
And there have been different epiphanies, you know, like there was the general creative epiphany, there was like the I'm going to do comedy epiphany, there was the I'm going to go into theme park design epiphany, and knowing me in like 6 years, there'll be another epiphany that's sort of related to creativity at some point, and I'll run that one out too.
But that's great. I mean, because that's how we kind of bounce along in life, and I think that's that's golden stars to you in terms of always kind of opening the horizons and looking for new challenges and stuff, which I think for us kind of, I humbly include myself in with this creative group of guys. I bow to your the time that you spent with it, but we didn't want to go work in a factory. I mean, we didn't want to stand on an assembly line and drill holes or fill out spreadsheets for the accountant department or something. We always wanted something new and fresh to challenge us, and I think that plague, I don't know if you want to call it that, it's just always pushing us along to find the next horizon and find the next thing to grow. So which is partly why I kind of went this direction. But I'm jealous of you because you knew when you were like 10 or 12, that this was the direction you were going to go, right? Yeah.
Looking back, it's easy for me to say I knew. And think about how I approached school. I was a good student, so I didn't have a problem with grades or education or anything like that. But the things that interested me weren't really the maths and sciences. It was more the humanities and the arts and history and social studies and sociology and things. So I was always drawn to subjects of the human condition, to use like a lofty phrase. And I was lucky that I had good support with my folks and good support with like the education system, where they were able to notice that these were the things that I liked, and they had opportunities in the school system to steer me that way. That like I could get into the music program and start learning an instrument. I could join the chorus. I could do the drama club. I could go to Kappa. Pittsburgh had a magnet performing arts school that was basically like Fame, if you remember the old TV show.
Sure. Where
it was in the morning you did your academics, and in the afternoon it was like 5 hours of acting and theater classes.
Man.
So
that's
I had
awesome.
those opportunities, and it was able to sort of like slowly develop like my professional skills or my learning center, so that I was able to eventually piece together careers in these fields. Mm-hmm. So it was part the epiphany, and a big part of it was the luck of having the family support and the institutional support in the school systems to make it all possible.
Wow, that's great. That's I'm jealous. For me it was kind of the opposite. I went to a prep school. I was supposed to be a doctor or an engineer or one of those, a lawyer or something, and they didn't even have art classes in the school I was in. I went to it was a Jesuit high school, or college preparatory. I had to go to the girls preparatory to get, and I didn't do that till like my senior year. So I started really late, and then that's probably why I've been fumbling around. I'm jealous, Baz. When did you stumble on the theme park thing? Like you mentioned that, at first you didn't even know it was a thing. None of us really did. It was just, we just went, and, I went to Disneyland in 1960. 4, I think it was 64 or 65 first time I went in California. But can you remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember that very specifically because it was within the last 10 years, so I like it, that one's fresh. And like all good things in life, it's from like a sequence of events of interesting decisions I made earlier that led me here. So the comedy world that I was a part of, the sketch comedy world, was very tight-knit. Like there were a handful of groups around the country, and this is in the days before YouTube, that were pretty prolific, and we would tour and send films out to film festivals and stuff. So we got to know each other, like my group in Chicago and groups from New York, Seattle, San Francisco, LA. And one of the groups was a group named Elephant Larry in New York City, and Stephen Lawrence is a good friend of mine from that group. And Stephen now works at the head of the group in LA, which is another really fantastic design firm. Yeah. And Stephen had grown up in Orange County, and our little group of friends, every year we had a thing we called Sketch Camp, where we would pick a city and just do like a 3-day retreat where we wouldn't talk about sketch, we wouldn't like do shop, we wouldn't like talk shop, we wouldn't work on stuff, we would just hang out as friends and have a good time. And like one year it was Vegas, one year it was Asheville, North Carolina, and Stephen decided to have it at Disneyland in 2007, I think. And I hadn't been to a theme park in maybe 10 years for that. But I never like got my love for it. It just fell off my radar because I was busy doing.
Sure.
Stephen decided to have sketch camp at Disneyland, so it was like, oh, I remember loving Disney stuff, and like I started Googling Disney stuff and sort of like refresh my memory of all the things that I really like adored about the Disney park. So like the Grim Granny Ghost song and Haunted Mansion immediately came back into my head after 10 years of never hearing it. And like the animatronic in the Pirates of the Caribbean whose leg is hanging out like this, like these tiny little details that I'd only seen like 2 or 3 times somehow had been like seared into my memory. And I remember thinking, oh wow, that's a weird thing that you could just experience this for such a short time and have like total recall 10 years later. So I went out a day early, and Stephen met me, and he and I went to Disneyland together before the rest of the kids got there, the sketch kids who were just going to drink and have fun. And he and I just totally nerded out. And at this point, he wasn't in the business either. And we were walking around it and thinking about it from an adult perspective and from a creative perspective. Like, I can see the storytelling, and like, look at these details in this fence work, and look at it, how the sidewalk is cracked, and this is Disney, so that's not like a crack that happened, that's a crack that was designed and put in there, and why. And we had this like amazing day of just like, we rode like 3 rides, but we just like soaked in every bit of design, not even knowing what the language we were speaking at the time, but like taking it all in. And then we hung out for the rest of that weekend. And then after the trip, Stefan's like, so I'm thinking about like moving into that business and trying it, and I think you should too. And I was like, it's a business? And that's when like my whole like perspective on this flipped, because I was like, yeah, I could totally do that. That'd be amazing. How does that work? And then we started like looking into what it takes to design theme parks and make it, and who's doing it in the business. And from that moment on, I was like, yeah, I could 100% do this.
Was there a financial push? I mean, one of the things when we're chasing our art kind of stuff and entertainment, I was a starving artist for a while, and I literally was a starving artist because, this art thing, this creative thing, sometimes it's really tough to make. I mean, when you make it, they make it big time, but when you're kind of struggling along at the middle level or and stuff, there's not a whole lot of money. I mean, there's passion for what you're doing, but you're not banking anything.
No, and like one of the last things that I did in the comedy world before I like went full time into the theme park industry was I was working with The Onion, the satirical newspaper and website. And for my money, The Onion was about as good as it could get in terms of like quality, and they hired me to work on one of their TV shows, and it felt like I was in the pocket and like this is what I could do, but like the money from that was not great. And once the show was over, I had to jump back into the hustle and try to find another job that would be like just as exhausting and pay just as little. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work. And coincidentally, I got my first like consulting gig on it was a roller coaster for a park just outside of Shanghai.
Okay.
And it was like the assignment was like, hey, this roller coaster is based on kung fu movies. Can you watch these 60 kung fu movies and find awesome moments in it that would make a good roller coaster? I was like, this is a job.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
That's great.
And I did it, and it paid like the same amount that I was making for like a week on The Onion. I'm like, I would much rather be doing this kind of bizarre, fun, creative work than hustling for the comedy work and maybe not getting it and struggling to get by. So having those two gigs like right next to each other, it's sort of like, this is where I'm at in the comedy world, this is where I'm at in the theme park world, which one of these is going to be more stable? And that was part of the appeal. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So that, I mean, it made some financial sense too. I mean, from a practical sense of just surviving. It is, because it is, it's less, this industry is a little bit less entertainment oriented in the sense of shows. It's still entertainment, but it's sort of permanent installations as opposed to traveling shows or doing a performance and stuff. It's creating things that are going to continue to perform. So it's a little bit more stable that way.
I like to think about it in terms of shelf life. And at The Onion, for example, I would labor for a week trying to get like a headline of like 6 words just right, and there is a craft to it.
Sure.
And when you nail it, it feels great. But even the best stuff that I would do there would sort of like, it would catch on to critical mass for like 40 minutes, and then it just kind of evaporates.
Mm-hmm.
But in the theme park world, you got to think generationally, because these things that we do are so expensive that you got to build it to last, so that this person can love it and their kid can eventually love it and their kids can eventually love it. You got to think like 30 to 40 year storytelling, which means a very specific kind of approach to solving creative problems. And you're thinking more like, universal and less specifics. I say like The Onion was about headshots and theme parks are about center of mass.
Okay.
Like you gotta hit that appeal that like a lot of people can get something out of, and if you get too specific with it, it's going to have like a narrow shelf life. So it's a really interesting, different approach, and I dig it.
Oh, cool. No, that's an awesome point. Okay. So you've been in like the theme park stuff for 7 years, 10 years? I'm sorry.
I think 7 or 8 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you seen changes happening as you got into it?
Yeah. The big changes, there's sort of like I think what's happening in China is like the biggest and most interesting change that in America and in Europe and in Japan, the theme park industry is mature and actually kind of saturated. Like, we've got our parks, we've got we have our number of people that we need to satisfy, and we've met it. So there's not a whole lot of like big major parks getting built in the States or in Europe or in Japan anymore. Every once in a while something will happen, like Universal's doing their stuff in Florida and in Japan, but like the big action with like new parks is happening in China, and for a while it was happening in Dubai, because those are areas that have like emerging middle classes and people that are hungry for like anything to do with their family, and there isn't a legacy of these kinds of projects there. So there's a big market inefficiency, for lack of a better word. Like, people in China need theme parks because they need something fun to do. So this middle ground between like the well-established stuff in the States and in Europe and the nothing that was here before that is getting filled in China right now is probably the biggest, most interesting thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, and which also it's a new challenge to you and me, and I felt it is, now you've already told us that you need to think more universally and more broadly so that you create something enduring for a whole different culture. that you don't know about. I mean, you know about what entertainment, you know the basics and the fundamentals of what keeps people's attention, what blows their skirts up, but it's just like I can't remember the last time I told a joke in China, because it's just a different thing, and comedy relies on references and all that kind of stuff, and they just don't have the same stuff. So there's an extra challenge there, because like you're saying, that the emerging stuff that you want to make generations of interesting things happen. So it's a stretch. I find it to be.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is. And part of it is that the middle class in China is emerging so rapidly, relatively speaking. And in America, we didn't figure out what a theme park was until we had amusement parks for 50 years, right? Mm-hmm. You had Coney Islands, and then in 57 you had Disneyland. That's a long time to build up an expectation of what this place is supposed to be, and then exceed the expectation. And in China, whenever I work on a project, and the chairman or the owner of the company wants to come in guns a-blazing and skip over that 100 years of development and go straight to beating Disneyland right now.
Right.
And it's hard, because you kind of have to educate your guests too. You have to make sure that there's a cultural understanding of what you're going to experience before you can deliver on the promise that you're making and hopefully exceed it. And that's aside from the general question that you brought up about what makes something relevant to a culture. And we call it Western chauvinism a lot, because the reality is pretty much everyone that is in this business of designing theme parks lives either around my house in Pasadena, in California, or is in Orlando. It's these two really hyper-focused spaces where all of this development gets done. And we have a way of doing things that has worked, but the big missing chunk is how do we speak the actual language of experience to the native audience? And explosions are universal, and thrills are universal. Yeah. But those things are easy. The things that make when I first talked to you about my Disney World impression, the things that I mentioned, I didn't say Space Mountain, and I didn't say Big Thunder Mountain. I said the music from the Haunted Mansion and the animatronic leg and Pirates. The thing that made those experiences impactful and amazing to me as a 10-year-old kid and as a 40-year-old man were not the explosions and the thrills. It was that subtle emotional hook that resonated with me. And finding out how to do that, how to identify and enunciate that kind of an experiential moment for a Chinese audience is something that everyone's trying to figure out, and we will. It just takes time, but it's really, really tricky.
Yeah, but what a key, what a key to that mystery and that conundrum and that puzzle that's what makes an enduring thing. That's what makes it generational. That's what really, finding the, well said and well pointed out. And I think everybody should kind of take notes on that one, because it really is. It's not because that was one of my frustrations in coming to China is they want the results, but they don't want to have to go through the steps and the things that have to be done to build up to that point. They don't really do the story. They just want they want the ending with the bangs and all the good fun feelings, but you don't get that without the build up and stuff. And I think that's universal.
That's what's paid off, and that's what's separated a fun time from an amazing, awesome time. And it's not every Disney attraction was Pirates of the Caribbean with the cool leg moment. There were plenty of Stitch's Great Escapes, or things that were not quite as impactful in there. So there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of like getting it not quite right before you figure it out. And we've had 100 years of experimenting in the States and in Europe to figure this out. And China is I can't remember I don't know when we want to backdate like the start of China's theme park explosion to, but I feel like it was early 2000s. It was probably around then. Yeah. So we're taking like 100 years of like trial and error, compressing it down into 20. Yeah. And the good thing I would say is, as I've been working on projects in China since like 2014. Okay. And each one seems to have taken a step, another step towards like a story-centric or an emotional core than the previous one. I think like the lessons are being heard, but there's always that like, because the timetables are so accelerated, they know explosions work, they know thrills work, so give me that. And if you want to do the story thing, we'll see if it works. I expect that like as Chinese audiences and Chinese owners and companies start to see those results, like that China will develop its own story structure for these kinds of experiences too. I'm just hoping I get to be a part of that conversation, because I find the exploration fascinating. And
well, I think you will. I mean, I think there is that blossoming market that's happening. And I came into it fairly early here in China, and they wanted the results. They didn't want to have to deal with the story, but now there's more competition. The Disney's come into China, Universal Studios is coming into China. We've got new competition, and all the guys that want to make theme parks, that are earnestly into theme parks, like my boss, he wants to create that enduring stuff. So there's starting to be a demand for that. It is not as sophisticated an audience as it is in the West, just because of the same thing you're mentioning. It's 100 years of that sophistication, going from Coney Island roller coasters to, there ought to be something more to this, So, interesting developments, but everything happens faster in China. I mean, it just, bam, anything you want to do, it's just, things that take 2 years to develop in the States happen in 2 weeks here, so.
I know.
Is there something else you'd want to say about the challenges that are facing this industry?
The industry is it's weird, because it is an industry. It's very expensive. It spends a lot of money. There's a lot of really talented people like working on it, but it's not like there's a true template for success, right? Like these park projects are so specific to where they happen, when they happen, who's running them, and who they're for. It's really difficult to ape like the Shanghai Disney approach for a park in Qingdao or Huizhou, right? Like, it's not the same thing. You don't have the same corporate goals. You don't have the same audience exposure to IP. You don't have the same synergistic platform development stuff happening on the side. So it makes it really tricky. And one of the challenges that I've had with different owners of park projects is that the expectation sort of like is set by the Disneys and Universals, who are operating on a completely different, they're operating with a different set of physics. Like, their park doesn't have to live or die by this like bottom line. They've got other ways to make money. They have other reasons for doing a theme park. They've got 50 years of design booklets and show bibles that they can rely on to make sure they get it right. And they have the money to burn, so they can drop like $14 billion on a park project, and like that's fine by them. And when owners come in expecting to like deliver something at the quality level of a Disney or a Universal, and their expected budget is 10% of that, the hard thing is like finding a way to like identify what the actual expectations are and what the actual expectations of the guest and the needs of the guest are, and having that conversation with ownership. And there are some people that really do know their audience and their park and their brand really well. Like your boss, he's got like such a great like sense of what his company is and where it fits in this whole thing, and that makes it a lot easier. But there's a lot of companies out there, not just in China, but also in the UAE or even in Europe, that have this misalignment of expectations that puts the creatives in a hard place, because they have to like design the creative to meet these expectations, but the ability to follow through on it makes it incredibly challenging. So that's one of the challenges that I think faces us.
And I think you're right. And I think that's to put a feather in my boss's cap. He's known where that point of good enough is perfect. Because he as he developed over the 30 years that he's been in business, he hasn't made stuff that's phenomenal and great. He made stuff that was just about right. And then it became very successful, which gave him the ability to afford the next step. And that's some kind of magic, I think. That's some kind of having that feeling to know when to kind of draw the line and say, that's good enough, let's go.
Yeah, I think like the goal in theme park should always be to like be better than your last park or be better than your last attraction.
Well, there's a lesson in life, isn't it?
I don't have to really be better than. I don't have to be better than Disney. Yeah. I got to be better than myself.
Right. And then, that's a life lesson, for all of us, and no matter what you're doing, it's you just have to get better every day, or every project or every whatever it is. It's just you need an incremental increase in improvement.
Right.
And that's been one of my faults, is I always wanted to be perfect, and it stopped me a lot of times, because that's probably what your entertainment experience kind of taught you is. It ain't going to be perfect every time. Sometimes you're going to fumble a line. Sometimes it's going to drop. Sometimes there's going to be a degree of failure. Hopefully there's 51% or more success, but there's nights when it didn't happen.
If left to our own devices, I think you and I and anyone else that works in this business, if we had infinity minutes to complete a design package, we would use infinity -1, right? Yeah. Like, we will fill the time we have with our energy and our passion and our thinking to make it as good as it can be. Honestly, like, we need someone that says, no, it's pencils up, this thing is out the door, it's time to get going. And for me, like, the theater stuff was that, because showtime is at 8:00, whether I think I'm ready to go or not, I got to get on stage. And the pursuit of perfection is actually paralysis, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. Like, you can always convince yourself that something isn't ready. One of the things we pass around the office a lot is the audience never sees the show that's on paper; they see the show that's in front of them. Mm-hmm. So all of those design things that we sweat, like we had like a 10-day long discussion in our office about like, if we could get like an extra like 1 degree of range of motion on an arm, and like what's that gonna buy us? And it's like, the audience isn't gonna see that 16 degrees, they're gonna see the 15. And sometimes the producer has to come in and say, no, stop it, you guys, you're good. Like, it works. It is what it is. Put it out there. Yeah.
Well, and that comes with the experience. That's one of the things that as an art director type of character, that's one of the things that I kind of learned over the years, is to take the viewpoint of the audience. What is it going to matter? See, and I came from sets and scenery where we scotch tape or gaff tape something and sort of stuck it there temporarily because it was just going to be for the video shot or the TV shot. Yeah. Who no one was ever going to see the back of it that was ready to fall off any second. As long as it was there for the camera, after that you threw it in the dumpster anyhow. So learning the guest experience, which is another big challenge for us in the theme park industry, is our audience moves. You know, when you were doing stage stuff, you were on the stage and you could control what the audience got to see. In this industry, we get a percentage of that, but it's got to be viewed from many, many viewpoints, and it has to survive that. So
you come from the art direction world where you've got to consider, you know, you're I don't know if your process does this, but a lot of the art directors I work with work from like a perspective shot, and it's like, okay, so here's like this is the image I want guests to see, and you can work to that image, but that image is going to change, it's going to parallax because people are walking through it. So what's that image from here? What's that image from here?
Right.
What's that image from back here? And figuring out how to like tell stories in dimensional space is really kind of unique to our business. Like on like a creative story level, you know, my job isn't to write a story for the guests, it's to like create the ingredients so they can tell their own story about that experience, because I can't be too specific or narrative or didactic about it. I can only like present this world and hope that they can piece this story together for them. And in a similar way, aesthetically, when you're doing that, you know, you set this idea of what this space looks like from a given perspective, and you've got to make sure that that's got to like accommodate all the different viewpoints that could possibly happen in that area. It's really, really tricky, and you know, that's why we over design these things, because we're trying to anticipate so many different
viewpoints,
possible ways they're being assumed.
But I've seen you do that. I've seen you, you know, as we go through and we look at some of the products that are being created, you know, we go to the factory and we see this and that, and I see that those same wheels turning in your brain about, you know, what if we, like the other day, we moved that thing, we adjusted it a little bit to point a little bit more sideways or a little bit more down, because and it made such a huge dramatic difference that you folks at home, you know, wouldn't you know, necessarily appreciate, because you first of all, you didn't see how the wrong one, so you don't get to compare it. But we do, you know, we get to see what's going to happen, and we get to take that viewpoint and think about that stuff.
We could spend 10 days talking about the orientation of that figure,
right,
and try to get it right from every angle. So you have to like know which of those little problems are the most impactful, and spend the right amount of time trying to solve it. It's a really tricky puzzle, but I guess like we into it, right?
Yeah, but you know, I mean, that's kind of the joy of that balancing act, and I think guys like you have the experience. You know, you've got the track record that makes those seemingly silly little calls count. You know, and it's like that 80-20 rule. You know, the 20% of stuff that you do is the really effective stuff, and it's trying to do more of that 20% than doing all the other 80% of the crap that really doesn't matter. It's honing it down in this finite, usually time frame for us. It's usually not a budget thing. Sometimes it's a budget thing. Most of the time for us, particularly in these in China and you know, in the United Emirates and stuff, maybe not so much there, but in China it's I gotta have it now kind of thing. It's very, very fast. What mistakes are you seeing guys do?
Oh yeah, it's a fun one. I'm not going to cast any stones at anyone I know, because literally everyone in the business that I've worked with is smarter than me, more talented than me, nicer than me. I always feel like the biggest schlub in a room, and I love that. So everyone that's working on these things is supremely talented. That said,
wait, should I put my safety glasses on here? So
No. And I hope you don't mind that I answer this sort of like from an overall guest experience.
No, absolutely. I think that's the right viewpoint. Yeah.
There is an over-reliance on screens, on media screens, and on digital technology, and especially things like VR or AR. I don't want to call it gimmicky, but I would say that parks sometimes make the mistake of using a technology where that technology is like only 6 months away from what would be available to a consumer to take home and use at their house. That putting a VR headset on and walking through a room is something that you can do at a park now. You'll be able to do it in your house next year. And getting back to my thought about thinking generationally, these things that take place on screens and on devices and in virtual reality is not a generational approach, I don't think. I think that's stuff that has a very limited time shelf life and it's pretty limiting. And I look at the stuff that Universal did with Harry Potter, and Diagon Alley in Orlando in particular, and Hogsmeade and all the parks, where the ride wasn't necessarily the most amazing thing about those lands. It was more the placemaking and the physical environment you're walking through. And honestly, I feel like that taught me a lesson about how if you reward the physical, reward the people for leaving their home by putting them in a world that is truly immersive and tactile and, if at all possible, responsive, you're really doing something people can never get at home. Wow. And if you're showing a thing on a media screen, if you're puppeting a live character with media, this is awesome, but it's like that is something that people are going to be able to give themselves at some point in the future. So you always want to do something that they can't do for themselves. And I think when people hear like the sales pitch for the technology for VR or for media stuff, it's very attractive and it's awesome and it's like inspiring and it looks really great. So it's easy to say yes. But my personal preference and my honest assessment is that the thing that's going to be tried and true as we move forward is the stuff that you do, which is art directing physical spaces that people can't go to anywhere else.
I have to say, and not because that's what I do, but I think that's profound. You know, I mean, and to me it is. It's profound. It's you actually turned a little light on in my head just now with that, because you know, there is so much technology and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, you know, seeing a video of the Northern Lights versus standing there and seeing you know, I mean, I always do that, even when you're taking a photograph with the amazing new cameras that we have on our smartphones. You know, you look at a scene and go, oh my God, that is, and you put the thing up and you do what other thing, and you click it and you go, what happened? You know, you know, it just didn't come to, you know, and that artistry, that skill of the photographer, you know, the professional photographers that are able to somehow capture that on the, you know, through the thing, we get closer to it with this technology, and at some point it starts to come home. But thank you for that profound thing, because you're right. I mean, why? You know, that's happened in home theaters. You know, we have surround sound and big giant screens, and what's different than going to the theater now? Why do I go buy a ticket at the theater? So I can hear other people around me, you know, reacting to the movie or talking, or, you know. So, wow, that's a good point.
Thankfully, I get to make amends to any of my friends in the media production and AV integration businesses by saying the following. I think the future and where we should be going is taking the best lessons we can learn from the technical side of this computer age, the data-driven age, and applying it to the stuff that we've already mastered in terms of placemaking and visual design, set design, scenic, and attractions. What I mean by that is, what's cool about virtual reality isn't so much that you're surrounded by images, it's that you're able to affect change and control over an environment. That, like, in the VR world, you can point your hand and then you go like this and you turn a flower pot into a snake. And that's an awesome feeling. And in the game industry, and someone in our industry, we call this agency, that the user has the agency to affect permanent and lasting and impactful change on their environment. The best thing we could do is take the things that we've learned about data and understanding where guests are, how they're interacting with the environment, and marrying that with show action and scenic design so that guests can actually transform the physical environment that they're in. Mm-hmm. That a guest can walk into a space and sort of intuitively understand how to kind of like manipulate the environment or affect change. I think like moving from a presentational to a participatory environmental experience is like where the really cool stuff is going to happen. And that's about taking like the stuff you can do with the screen or with the media and just getting rid of the screen, right? It's the same programming, it's the same if-then trees, it's the same execute this if people are doing this. It's just instead of doing it on like a tablet or a headset, you're putting it out there in the world that you're walking through. And like the little example of that is like the magic wands at Potter, right, where people can do this and you see magic happening. If you can scale that up, if you can figure out a way to make these parks like react to people walking through them, I think that's a game changer, and that's what I would like to be working towards.
Wow, that's a tough one, Baz, because that's you back on the stage reacting to the audience reaction, and it's not to the listener in the singular tense, it's to the listeners, and which all great entertainers, develop that sense or that magic. When Mick Jagger gets up there and starts doing his thing, everybody's in the palm of his hand, and that's a magic that these guys develop and do. For technology to do that, wow. I don't think it's impossible. That's the big. That's
not impossible.
Yeah, that's
hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a big challenge, but awesome. That's another nice pearl. Thank you for that one.
Sure.
Cool. Okay. That's what you see in the future. What advice would you give to someone that wanted to get into this business, or this kind of, creative characters that are, I don't know, they're musicians, they're story writers, they're technicians. What advice would you give people to get into this industry?
I realized that my first bit of advice is go for it. Our industry has we missed a generation of talent, mainly because people like me didn't know it was a business, and also because there weren't as many opportunities for work because China wasn't quite as booming as it was, and the UAE wasn't as booming. But regardless, my generation of people that are like 30 to 45 years old right now, missed out on being theme park folks because they went into TV or film or video games. So there's a real hunger for people that have some creative chops, know how to lead teams, and we will help you understand how to speak the technical language of our business. It's about understanding how to solve creative problems and, lead teams to arrive at a solution. So please jump in. There's a couple of different approaches that you can do to break in. Obviously, like the networking and emailing people and asking for chats, just do that. After that happens, my suggestion is to spend some time as a generalist. Like, I came into this as a writer, as a show writer first, and because of the company that I was working with, I got a lot of exposure to the various kinds of roles that happen in here, and I didn't have to specialize in show writing. I could kind of like learn a little bit about art direction, learn a little bit about reading CAD and understanding show set and interfacing with animatronics companies. Taking some time to just work in like a coordinator role or anything that exposes you to how we interface with all those different expertise, all those different expertises, because you may not necessarily want to specialize in the thing that you're already specializing in. So it's always nice to do that. However, if you are a composer and you're going to be a composer, just start making friends. There's always room for you. So we need people in the business that understand everything about the creative picture, and we need people that are incredibly talented at that one tiny sliver of creativity that we need for a specific project. There's room for both, and if you're not already like 25 years into that one specific sliver of expertise, be cool being a generalist, step back, see how the projects come together, and pick your area of focus. And you might end up like me as a creative director, where you're a professional generalist. Yeah. And for my money, it's actually the most fun because I need to know a little bit about everything and a lot about some things, but like it helps me to stay fresh because I'm learning new things and working with new, quirky, talented people, balafonists and musical saw players and who knows what else.
Well, awesome. I mean, I think you're right, and I think that that's another sort of life lesson that this time in our history, in human history, there's so much to know and so many things to do, so many millions of paths to take. That you mentioned the sliver, going this direction and that direction. Almost everybody has to kind of take a sliver now to get along, to excel in a particular profession or genre, and we're going to start missing the generalists. We're starting to, there is that void that's sitting there of people that sort of know enough about a lot of things, which is, to me, that's one of the blessings of me not really knowing what the heck my purpose in life was. So I went out and did everything, and I got my hands dirty with all kinds of stuff, and felt a lot of angst and a lot of frustration about, what should I really be doing in my life? It didn't gel till way later on when I went, geez, I know a lot about a lot of things, and now I can use that stuff. And I notice working with kids now, 20-year-olds, I call them kids, sorry guys, but 20s and 30-year-olds, they know maybe a lot about this thing, but they have no exposure to, because there's just too much. There's just too much stuff, so, and I think this industry is still, although it's been developing, it's still a bit young, compared to lots of other industries, to where, compared to just theater or movie making and stuff like that, it still has some room.
I agree 100%. There's a lot of room, and, we're going to figure out what this industry actually is together over the next, 10, 15, 20 years. So jump on board and help us get there.
Cool. So
it's an exciting time, actually.
Yeah, it actually is. It actually is. It is kind of a bubbling thing. So, I really kind of hope you don't go anywhere other than the theme park industry, Baz. I think the input and then your experience that you bring to this, you're one of the characters that's really needed in this industry. So I hope you stick around for another 10, 15 years. Although, if some other whistle calls, go play. But and those of you that are listening for whistles and want to know more about this, I'm going to put this stuff on Facebook, and I'll put it on YouTube, and you guys can always kind of private message me or whatever if you're looking for, like Baz mentions, get the word out there. I'll try to make a list of people that you can talk to or organizations that you could go knock on the doors of, or things of that people that are looking for talent to come in and that's one of the things that I like about this industry, is that you really can, just like Baz has done, I've done it, you can really do all kinds of stuff. You're not that limited. You're not so pigeonholed. It is still a little bit of a frontier to play with. And Baz, I can't thank you enough for spending this time with me and taking your time out there in Detroit and doing this. Thanks for the pearls of wisdom.
Hey, my pleasure, Bob. Always good talking to you, and I hope I get to talk to you face to face in China again soon. Get
that music done. I can't wait to see that stuff. And once again, Baz, thanks a ton. This has been fun.
It's been awesome, Bob.
All right. Take care. Have a good night. Or good day, I'm sorry.